Ciara Torres-Spelliscy. I tried, I practiced, and I failed. Is the Leroy Highbaugh Senior Research Chair and Professor of Law at Stetson University College of Law, where she teaches courses on election law and constitutional law. I'll go to Ciara because, in a way, your question, the question you wanted to address, speaks really well to Stuart's point about existing law, whether it's sufficient or not. So why is Michael Cohen the only person in Trump's orbit to go to jail for campaign finance crimes?
Okay, thank you. Good morning. So why is Michael Cohen the only one in prison? At least three reasons. One, the Supreme Court is rebranding corruption. Number two, the SDNY, which was the entity that prosecuted him, actually cares about enforcing anti-corruption laws like campaign finance. And thirdly, the special counsel was particularly gun-shy about enforcing campaign finance laws, which I think is linked to the first point, that the Supreme Court is destroying the concept of corruption. So let me explain each of those quickly. So I just wrote a book called Political Brands, which will be out in the fall. And in it, I look at different concepts in American political life that are getting rebranded, including truth, tragedy, and treason. And I have a whole chapter on rebranding corruption, which is one of the things that the Supreme Court has done over the past decade. And that matters because corruption is the last state interest that the Supreme Court recognizes as a justification for campaign finance law. And the more they narrow what corruption means, the fewer campaign finance laws will be found to be constitutional, whether they come out of Congress or the 50 states. Another consequence of the Supreme Court narrowing corruption, and they're doing it both in campaign finance and in white-collar crime cases, is that it makes it much harder for prosecutors to actually successfully prosecute a corrupt politicians. Now, corrupt politicians love this, but I think for the rest of us, it's really a tragedy. Secondly, these SDNY, the Southern District of New York, has a long and deep history of actually prosecuting politicians for their corruption. For example, when Preet was the head of SDNY, they went after corrupt politicians in Albany. And I think he trained his people well. And so when the special counsel spun off the Cohen case to the SDNY, they were ready for it. And so they prosecuted him for several crimes, including 2 campaign finance crimes. And Cohen actually pled guilty to those crimes, which is why he is now in prison. But why didn't the special counsel also prosecute campaign finance crimes? And some of that you would have to ask Special Counsel Mueller. But what I suspect he was reacting to is what the Supreme Court has done in the area of campaign finance, which is to largely deregulate it. And he just didn't want to die on that hill. I think there was an argument that he could have made to prosecute Donald Trump Jr. for receiving or soliciting a thing of value from the Russians, which would be the stolen emails. But he was not going to die on that hill. And you can see that in the Mueller report. He explains that this would be a novel application of campaign finance law, and he is simply not willing to do that. And then there's the question of the individual one status of the president in the Cohen case. So the Cohen sentencing memoranda notes that Cohen didn't do these crimes alone. There was AMI, which is the parent company of the Inquirer, but they get a non-prosecution agreement with DOJ. And then there's Individual One, which is the President of the United States, who, according to Cohen, directed these crimes. And there we have the disability that the special counsel was working under, which was he could not indict a sitting president. So all of that, I think, is the explanation for why Cohen is the only one who went to jail. But I would note that there are a number of Easter eggs in the Mueller report, including these dozen ongoing matters. And it's entirely possible that an ongoing matter could well be a campaign finance violation. So in light of all of this, the reforms that I would suggest is, for one, we need to clarify better what a thing of value means for campaign finance law purposes. I would put stolen emails in that category. We need better disclosure so that we end this dark money problem. In terms of money coming from corporations, one of the weird things about that is that corporations do not have to tell shareholders that they're spending their money in politics, nor do they need to get consent from those shareholders to spend that money. So a further reform would be to give shareholders a vote on future corporate political spending budgets. Public financing would definitely help. And then there are reforms that would require amending the Constitution because of what the Supreme Court has done in the area of campaign finance. So if you amended the Constitution to address Citizens United, then you could go back to the days when you could bar corporations from spending in federal and state elections. Or if you amended the Constitution to get rid of Buckley versus Vallejo, then you could actually have expenditure limits on rich individuals. So that might solve the Sheldon-Adelson problem. So I'll stop there.
Ciara, do you have, on any of these questions, you want to jump in?
Well, I'll answer the question that I wish I was asked, which is, are any of these reforms possible? And I would say, actually, yes. One of the results of Watergate was an invigorated electorate and an invigorated populace. And one of the ways you could measure that is 1 out of 4 letters to Congress after Watergate demanded campaign finance reform. We need to do that now. If that's your issue that you care about, write to your member of Congress, write to your 2 senators. If you're on the husting with the candidates, I think there are 101 of them now, demand that they—
It's like Dalmatians.
Yeah, demand that they take a stance on the part of this reform that you care about the most. Because if there isn't that public pressure, we've already seen how squishy Congress can be, even after the 2018 election. So I encourage you, use your First Amendment voice and demand more of your elected officials.
And Ciara, I want you to come in because you're like that actress who keeps herself hidden, and we all want to know more.
Oh man. So I guess one piece of advice I would give all of us is, I think the 2020 election is going to be a bleep show. And it's going to be that way because the lies are going to be coming fast and furious. So one thing I would suggest is, if someone appears to be your political opposite online, don't assume they're an American. Don't even assume they're a human being. They could be just an automated bot that is spewing out anger and hopes that you fight back. Don't waste your time on that. Focus on the issues that you care about and urge your favorite politician to adopt them.
Amen. That's applause, yes.
Thank you.